All right, I'm here with, off camera, we have Marcy and we have Ozzy. And in this video, we're gonna go over how you can use a little counter conditioning to stop your dog from barking outside the door. So this sweetheart right here is Marcy and Macy? Macy, sorry. I'm gonna remember because of the story. So for Macy just kind of follows along with whatever Ozzy does. Ozzy is protective of the house. And I think part of this comes from a lack of rules and structure, probably a little bit of over-exercise, and a lack of impulse control. So what we'd like to do is we want to create scenarios where we can control all the elements when we're doing behavior modification. So what I would do is I would list the help of a friend or a neighbor who can help you. Now, we don't have anybody out here right now, so I'm just going to pantomime this whole thing. So what we'd like to do is, the one problem with this, and this is not the ideal setup because this is a split level house. For dogs, the higher they are, the more rank or status they have. So I'm standing at the top of the stairs looking out down this flight of stairs and down that flight of stairs. I'm literally looking down my nose at a dog, as a dog outside there. What we want to do is just create a positive association. So, puppy, puppy, Macy. Okay, that'll work. So when you, here, buddy. So when he looks, I'll see if I can simulate with my hand. Yes. So I'm going to simulate like somebody walking by with my hand. Yes. Yes. So as soon as he looks at the person out there, I say yes, and I give him a treat. This is a little bit, there's a game called Engage, Disengage, this is kind of a component of it. Now, if he runs down the stairs and he's pounding at the door, that's not ideal. We don't want to give him a treat for that because that's reinforcing that behavior. Now, we can set him up for success. He's a lab, he's got a lot of energy, so exercising him first and giving him 10 minutes to recover will help for this. I don't usually like using a leash because if a dog's pulling on a leash, it's an indication it's over. I put it in too much of a situation. Some people put it on a leash to prevent it from running down there. If that's the case, I would have the person further and further away. You're gonna find that maybe somebody across the street, the dogs that Ozzy's cool with, but maybe in the halfway of the middle of the street, that's when that's his distance. So the idea is to find where that distance is. In my two tests, can I get the dog to sit and can I get it to take a treat while it can see the stimulus? And if it won't sit or take a treat, then I would increase the distance. I could move Ozzy away, but in this case, I'd probably make the person move further away. So what I would have to do with a person, I'm just gonna walk through the door, and I'm gonna have the person imagine that I'm across the street. I'm gonna start walking towards Ozzy so that you can kind of identify how close that person gets before Ozzy freaks out. And it might change. You know, for men, it might be a certain distance, for women, a different certain distance. That's okay. But you just need to note all those things. So let's say that I can get all the way across the street, and as soon as I step off the curb, that's when Ozzy lunges and goes to the door. So I go, okay, so now we've identified the distance. I'm gonna exercise Ozzy properly before we do it the next time. I'm gonna have the person all the way across the street so that Ozzy can see that person. They take 2 steps in the street, and then I say yes, and Ozzy turns and looks at me, I give him the treat, and I would probably do this with earbuds so the dog can hear, the person can hear you. And as soon as, tell the person, as soon as you hear me say yes, I want you to turn around and walk back to your original starting point. So the person's only taking like 2 steps towards Ozzy. You say yes for Ozzy looking at the person, and then Ozzy turns away, gets a treat. So I'm essentially getting a treat for looking at the person. And when I look back, look, the person's gone. Or at least they move further away. So you have the person do that. You might have to do 2 steps over and over again. And after Ozzy gets pretty good at this, maybe 5, 10, 15 times, then maybe you have the person take a 3rd step. And then you say yes, and then they walk away. And eventually they have them crossing the threshold, they're coming into your driveway, they're coming up your steps, they're eventually coming all the way to your door, and Ozzy is practicing sitting here because the arrival of this other person means I'm actually going to get a treat. So instead of not liking that, I'm gonna be like, can we get more people over? Corona's over, man, let's have a party. And so instead of him seeing himself as blocking or being territorial or guarding the house, he's now become the welcoming committee. Now, you're gonna have to practice with a lot of variety, and also be careful if there's a lot of stuff going on the street, that can be a mitigating circumstance that we don't wanna incorporate. So if there's kids running around or 4th of July or fireworks, something like that, don't practice at that time. Wait until the dog is nice and the street is somewhat calm. But eventually, you would like to do that. And eventually, I can have Ozzy here, and I can have the person further away, so I can ebb and flow, increasing the distance inside the house or increasing the distance outside the house. I think initially, because most of the time I'm guessing he's probably up there when he's barking at them, let's just start with whatever he does and then gradually mitigate it. But so there'll be a lot of variety you'll need to do back and forth. But once the people come in the house, Ozzy's comfortable with them. It's just the sight of them. So if you, and you could also do this with sound. So I'll just simulate right now. Well, that's not what I was expecting. Usually this sound causes the dogs to charge the door, like she did, because that means somebody's about to arrive. And then, there we go. Perfect. So that's an example. Can you grab the treats? Can he grab the treats?
Yeah.
So I'm going to have you grab 2 treats wherever the bag is. There you go. And so you can stay just right up there.
Okay.
And what you're going to do is I'm going to knock very, very lightly, and then you're going to give both dogs a treat. So kind of walk on this side of the camera.
Okay.
And have them both sit. Oh, wait, and make sure that when you're doing this, that the person has the treats ready to go. So hold one in each hand. So now,
Sit.
now don't give them until after I knock.
Oh.
That's okay. I timed it out, but that's the whole point of this is we want them to hear the knock, and then they get a treat. So I'm knocking very lightly
Macy.
to prevent them from freaking out. And just nod when they're in position you're ready to go. Now that was almost too much. So when you're doing this exercise, the dog should not react at all. Grab 2 more if there are 2 more up there. So what I'm going to do is at first I'm going to knock very lightly, and then they get one that knock a little bit heavier, but I'm only doing single knocks. And eventually I'm going to work my way up to where it sounds like the police are pounding them once. Then you go to 2 knocks, and I'll go ahead and try to do 2 knocks here.
Come here.
And then you're going to gradually work your way up to the point where you're like, and that's already a big improvement in only a minute. Now this is something I would practice a lot. So I would have your kids go outside because it's a different sound when I'm knocking here than somebody's outside. Also the doorbell's the same thing. Where is your doorbell register? Over there. So what you could do is you might want to record the audio of the doorbell, and that way you can actually play the doorbell very low volume, give them a treat, then play it a little bit louder, treat, louder, and eventually then and for that, if the doorbell's there, sometimes that's still too loud, you might need to muffle it with like a pillow. But eventually the doorbell rings and the dogs are like, who's giving me a treat, man? So it's almost like a command word that doorbell means I'm about to get a treat, but we're doing this independent of people coming through. In the meantime, while you're practicing this, I would probably put a note on your door. This is doorbell broken, please knock. And then work on the knocking part first because that's a little bit easier. And then that way you don't have your guest, because if your guest rings the doorbell, they run and bark, and then somebody comes in, that validates everything.
Yeah.
So if we curtail the doorbell, the only time I hear the doorbell now is when I'm getting these treats or the knocks for a while. Well, then now, when it actually accidentally, or not accidentally, when it happens, we're not worried about it before. The dogs aren't freaking out because they've been conditioned not to. So this is a little tip, this is a video on how you can teach your dogs to be not reactive when people come to the door, and how you can use desensitization and counter conditioning to stop a dog from reacting to the sound of the doorbell or knock at the door.